Someone cuts you off in traffic, and they are a maniac. You cut someone off, and you had a reason. You were late. The lane was ending. It was one time, same road, same move. Two completely different stories. And you never noticed you were telling two, because from where you're sitting there has only ever been one. That looks like hypocrisy. It isn't quite. Watch how consistent it is. Your colleague is late because they're unreliable. You're late because the train was canceled. Someone snaps at you because that's the kind of person they are. You snap at someone because it has been a brutal week. Every time. In everyone. About everyone. So the real question isn't why you go easy on yourself. It's why the whole type of explanation flips the instant the person changes. And the answer isn't that you secretly think you're better than other people. It's that you are the only person alive whose reasons you can actually see. You watch yourself from the inside, with the full running commentary of Lashin and quote, the pressures, the intentions, the bad morning, the thing you didn't say. You watch everyone else from the outside, where none of that exists. All you get is what they did, so you end up with reasons. And they end up with a personality. That single gap explains a startling amount. It explains why you're such a fair judge in your own case. Why every argument you've ever had contained two reasonable people. And the strangest one, why the more clearly you can see this bias in other people, the more certain you become that you don't have it. It shows up in three places. Start with the most ordinary. When you explain your own behavior, you reach for the situation. Traffic, deadlines, a bad night. When you explain someone else's, you reach for the person. Careless, rude, laissez. Researchers have poked at this for decades, and the tilt is remarkably hard to switch off. It shows up even when people are handed the situation on a plate. In one classic setup, people read an essay arguing a position and were told plainly that the writer had been assigned that side, no choice involved. They still concluded the writer probably believed it. The situation was right there in writing. The character explanation won anyway. And this isn't stupidity. Look at what each of you actually has to work with. You have a lifetime of footage of yourself, every reason, every constraint, every night you didn't sleep. Of the stranger in the next car, you have about 4 seconds of footage and no audio. Your mind doesn't announce that gap. It just quietly fills it with the only thing that fits a 4-second clip, a personality. The second place is subtler, and it decides most arguments. You know what you meant. Nobody else does. They only ever get what landed. So you grade yourself on intention and everyone else on outcome. You sent a short reply because you were between meetings and wanted to answer it all. They sent a short reply because they're cold. You forgot the birthday because the week ate you. They forgot yours because you don't matter to them. The same event, filed under two completely different headings, depending on which side of the skull you were standing on. And notice how generous the mechanism is to you personally. When you do something good, you get to take the credit that was you, your character, your effort. When you do something bad, the circumstances were unusual. Broadly, that's the pattern research keeps finding, though how strong it is varies a lot by person and situation. You are not lying. You're reading off the only instrument panel you were issued. And here's the cleanest proof that it's the information and not your character. Watch what happens when the reasons arrive. The driver who cut you off, you find out there's a child bleeding in the back seat and they're 12 minutes from a hospital. The anger doesn't fade slowly. It's gone. Instantly, completely, and the person you were furious at 2 seconds ago is now someone you'd wave through. Nothing about what they did changed. You just got handed the thing you never get, their reasons. You've felt this from the other side too. Someone finally hears why you did the thing they'd quietly written you off for, and you can watch their face rearrange. All that was ever missing was a fact you had and they didn't, which suggests something slightly startling. Most of the people you've quietly filed away as difficult are not people you disagree with. They're people whose reasons you never happen to receive. Now the third place, and this is where it gets uncomfortable. You're good at spotting this in other people. You can name the friend who never thinks anything is their fault. You can spot the colleague who is sure they're the only reasonable person in the building. So here's the finding that makes the whole thing land. When people are told about a mental bias clearly explained, examples and then asked how much they are affected compared with the average person, most people rate themselves as less biased than average, which statistically most of them cannot be. Read that again, and notice what your own mind just did with it, because there's a very specific thought available right now. It goes, yes, that's true of most people. Maybe it arrived with a face attached, someone you know who really does do this. That thought is the effect. not a failure of yours. You can't feel this one from the inside, which is exactly what makes it so reliable. When you look for bias in yourself, you look at your own reasoning and it seems fine because reasoning is all you have to look at. When you look for it in other people, you look at their behavior and there it is, plain as day. Same gap as the traffic. You get the reasons, they get the results. And you'd hope that being thoughtful about it would help. There's some evidence it doesn't. When researchers checked whether people who score higher on reasoning and reflection are less prone to this particular blind spot, they didn't find the protection you'd expect. If anything, the more mental horsepower someone had, the more of it was available for building a good case that they were the fair-minded one, which makes a strange kind of sense. Being clever doesn't give you a window into anyone else. It gives you a better lawyer for the only client you can hear. So this isn't a thing careful people grow out of. It's a thing careful people get more articulate about. None of this needs a designer or a flaw in you. It falls out of where you happen to be standing. You have exactly one interior, and you're locked inside it. Every other mind you'll ever encounter arrives as behavior, secondhand, with the reasons stripped out. And your mind has to make something of that. A gap in the evidence isn't a comfortable place to sit, so it produces an explanation fast and confidently, and it never once puts a label on it saying this part was a guess. Which is why the people you're closest to get slightly better treatment than strangers. You've actually seen some of their reasons, and why a person reduced to a headline, a comment, a car in the wrong lane gets the worst treatment of all. There isn't room in 4 seconds for anything but a character. And that scales in a way nothing in your history prepared you for. Almost everyone you form an opinion about now, you meet at the thinnest possible setting. One sentence with no face and no tone. A clip with no before and no after. A single decision with every pressure that produced it cropped out of frame. It is the least information a human being has ever had about another human being, and your mind will still hand you a whole personality at the usual speed with the usual confidence. Then turn that around, because this is the part that stings. Somewhere out there, you exist inside somebody's head as one sentence. One bad morning of yours preserved. A version of you built entirely out of what they couldn't see. And to them, it's obviously just what you're like. Which is how two decent people end up in a fight where both of them are, sincerely, the reasonable one. Because both of them are running the same program. Each has full access to their own reasons, and none at all to the others. Each is fair by the only standard available to them. And each hears the other's account as a transparent excuse because, from the outside, a reason and an excuse look identical. You can only tell them apart from the inside, and you're never on the inside of anyone else. And most of the time, nobody finds out. The driver never explains. The friend who went quiet never says what that year was like. The colleague never mentions what was happening at home. The reasons exist, they always exist, they just never make the crossing, and the verdict you reached in 4 seconds stays on file, uncorrected, sometimes for good. That's the real cost of the gap. Not that you're occasionally unfair, that you've almost certainly closed the book on people who had an answer you'd have accepted immediately, if it had ever reached you. So the next time somebody does something senseless, the driver, the friend who went quiet, the colleague who dropped the ball, you'll get one clean fact and no reasons at all, and your mind will hand you a personality to fill the gap. It's very good at that. It has never once told you it was guessing. You're not the exception. You're just the only person standing where you're standing. And everyone you've ever written off in 4 seconds was standing somewhere too, inside a whole life you were never going to get to see, with reasons that were, to them, as obvious as yours are to you. You can't fix the gap. You can't climb into anyone else. But you can remember that the confident little story your mind hands you about a stranger is made almost entirely of missing information. And then be a bit slower with it.